Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a non-spoiler book review on An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I think it's fair to say right now that this book is quite popular and quite hyped, and I think that there can be a danger in going into a book when it is so extremely popular because it's really hard to not have unrealistically high expectations. That's not to say that the book is undeserving of its praise or that there's no way it could possibly meet the hype. It's just to say that, like every book, there are going to be elements of this that appeal to some people and not to others. Starting with the basics and just what the book is about, this is a young adult fantasy book, and it follows two main perspectives, the first being a girl named Laya and the second being a young man named Elias. The thing that is motivating Laya's part of the story is that she is trying to free her brother who has been captured by the Empire, and Elias is a soldier of the Empire. He's currently attending this soldier school basically, and he is wanting to desert. He hates being a part of the Empire, but due to some events that come up, there may not be somebody to take over when the current emperor passes away, and Elias is forced to, along with a few other people, compete in some trials to potentially become the new emperor. In Laya's perspective, the way in which she kind of gets intertwined with Elias is that she joins up with this resistance that's against the Empire. It's just called the Resistance, and the way in which these people are going to try to help her free her brother is to make her a spy and send her into the school setting that Elias is in to try and get some information about the upcoming trials that will determine who the new emperor is. Neither of our two main characters are necessarily in a position they want to be in. Elias does not really want to be emperor. He wanted to desert, he wanted to leave, he didn't really want anything to do with the current lifestyle that he is being forced into. Laya does not want to become a spy. She wants to free her brother and she's willing to do whatever she possibly can to help him, but her life going into becoming a spy is to become a slave for the commandant of this school that Elias is at, and the commandant is known for being ruthless, for abusing and torturing her slaves. Both perspectives are actually told in first person, and I think that can be really difficult to pull off a first person narrative when you have multiple point of views. I did think that both of the characters had distinct enough personalities that it didn't feel like exactly the same no matter who you were with. Laya definitely has a lot of family pressure. You find out some of how her family was actually involved in the resistance, and so she has this idea that everyone in her family was brave except for her, and that she is so weak and she's so pathetic, and that really is a driving factor for her to try to always be braver. And oddly enough, Elias is sort of kind of the opposite. He has the power to use against people, he has the means, he has the training, but he doesn't want to. I do think that because of the decision to write the book in this way, it feels extremely character driven. You're very motivated and wanting to flip the page because of what's happening to the characters, what's going on with the characters, but it's also told in present tense, so it's not I decided to do this, it's I decide to do this, and so you're with them in the moment. And this doesn't always allow for reflection. This doesn't always allow for the narrative to bring about a natural world building. And so rather than forcing it to where it feels like the character's just telling you about something, rather than that happening, didn't get a lot of world building. If you absolutely love a lot of world building in fantasy books, you might be a little frustrated with the lack of it in this book. It's not that there's none. It's not that it's poorly done when it does get presented. It's just that there isn't a lot of it. An example of this is that a lot of the people in the book are separated into groups, and the group that Laya is from is known as the Scholars. They used to be the people that ruled, but then they were taken over by the Empire, and now the Scholars are very much mistreated and oppressed. However, the Scholars don't seem to share a specific set of features. I think for a lot of people, the fact that this book is extremely fast-paced and extremely character-driven and it's interesting, I think that that is going to trump maybe some of those world-building questions that might come up in certain readers' heads. But for people that get really, really into the world building, it might be seen as a negative. It does also have a lot of chemistry between the characters, whether it's a healthy chemistry or not. That's of course up to the reader, the individual, and how they view the characters and who they like and who they don't like. But I don't just mean necessarily like romantic chemistry. I mean sometimes it can be friendships developing or friendships falling apart or things like that. There's a lot of a lot of focus, I think, on the relationships between the characters. So for me, it didn't just feel like it was an extremely character-driven story where you're just following this character's motivations. It's also very, very driven by the relationships between the characters. Once again, because it was so heavy-leaning in this way, I think that sometimes the plot felt a little meandering. And again, that's not a negative, it's a preference thing. And I think that there were things that led up, for sure. There were things that were mentioned in the beginning that came into play later. If you are the kind of reader who really, really likes a fantastic plot, that might bug you about this book because you're discovering the plot basically as the characters are discovering the plot. It's also fast-paced, but it's not just fast-paced for that. It's also fast-paced because there's a lot of action. I don't know that the book ever felt really, really slow at any point. There was always something going on. There was always some kind of imminent danger that we had to worry about. With a lot of danger and a lot of action does come a fair amount of violence. I didn't ever feel that the violence was extremely explicit and detailed and disgusting, but it's disgusting in that there's violence, right? Like there's bad things happening to people who are undeserving of it. There are bad things happening to kids. There's sexual violence. Didn't come across to me as a cheap way for me to root for the main characters. It just felt like it was an indication of how brutal the Empire is and how the people in power are abusing their power. As far as the writing itself, I thought that this book was well written. I did notice that there were a decent amount of metaphors and similes, but I didn't think that they were done I didn't think they were done to the point where they were so flowery that I'm like, okay, that's ridiculous. Just like say what you mean. I didn't think it was done like that. And I also didn't think it was cheesy. Like his eyes were as blue as the sky. Like it wasn't quite to that extent. I thought that the metaphors and similes were used fairly often, but they enhanced the imagery and they enhance the experiences that the characters were having. Because this book is a fantasy, I do usually like to give you guys a heads up as to whether there's magic and how much the magic plays a role in it. And in this book, I wouldn't say that there's magic, but there's definitely some supernatural type things going on, and it's really not explained or dived into that much. A lot of it feels very unfamiliar to the characters themselves, so I think it's meant to be unfamiliar to us and maybe explored in future books, but it wasn't really explored a ton in this one. That's it though. I definitely think that if you guys are fans of character-driven stories, that this book is going to meet the expectations. It's going to meet the hype that you've probably been hearing, but if you're somebody who's used to maybe high fantasy or fantasy with a lot of world building and prep and explanation to the magic and all that kind of stuff, you might get a teensy bit annoyed in this book because there's not always a ton of that. If you're interested in reading this book and you think based off what I've said that it sounds like it's up your alley, I would definitely say give it a go. It was entertaining. It definitely always kept me wanting to read more, and if you're somebody who has read the book, let me know what your thoughts were on it. As always, thank you so much for watching. Happy reading to all of you, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.